Summary of the Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. Tom Ripley lives in a rundown apartment in New York City, and he is working as a casual extortionist. That's where he meets Herbert Greenleaf. Herbert, Dickie Greenleaf's father, wants his son to come back from Europe, where he is working as a painter in a small town called Montebello. Dickie used to know Tom. Herbert offers to pay for Tom's trip to Europe if Tom can get Dickie to return home. Tom takes the offer and gets on a boat headed for Europe. He grew up poor and is still jealous of the rich people he meets in New York. In Italy, Tom sets up a chance meeting between himself and Dickie. Dickie and Marge Sherwood are the only two Americans in Montebello. Tom tries to fit in with them, even though he feels that there is sexual energy between them. It seems like Dickie is cold and distant at first. Tom, on the other hand, tells Dickie that Herbert sent him, which makes Dickie laugh, and he becomes friends with Tom. They become very close as they move around Italy together. Dickie lets Tom use his clothes and even jokes about calling him Mr. Greenleaf when he moves in. When the two men get too close all of a sudden, it bothers Marge, so she talks to Dickie about it. Dickie returns to being cool with Tom. Tom chooses to kill Dickie and take his place because he thinks that his relaxed and luxurious life in Italy may be coming to an end. Tom thinks the trick will be easy because he is good at forgery and impersonation. Tom and Dickie take a boat out into the bay on their way to San Remo. While they are out at sea, Tom kills Dickie by hitting him with an oar and letting his body sink. Tom goes back to land after sinking the boat and starts to hide his crime and do what he needs to do to become Dickie Greenleaf. Tom runs away to Rome, where he changes a few things about how he looks, rents an apartment in Dickie's name, and spends Dickie's money. He enjoys his fancy new life and wears Dickie's clothes and expensive rings. In his letters, he tells Marge that he had to move away and can't see her while he figures out how he feels about her. He also tells Dickie's parents that he has decided to stay in Italy after all. When another American, Freddie Miles, gets Dickie's address and comes to visit, Tom answers the door as himself and just barely avoids being caught. Freddie is suspicious, though, because Tom is wearing Dickie's jewelry and clothes. Tom tells Freddie that Dickie is just downstairs at a nearby cafe, but as Freddie is leaving, he runs into Dickie's landlord, who says that Senior Greenleaf is the only person living in the apartment and is actually upstairs. When Freddie comes back to look into it, Tom kills him too. Then, he drives Freddie's body to a graveyard, leaves it behind a headstone, and makes a scene of drunken celebration. When the cops find Freddie's body, they ask Dickie because they are sure he is who he says he is. Although Tom is pleased, he soon sees a newspaper headline about the finding of a bloody boat in the Bay of San Remo. Finding a body in the water will likely be that of Tom Ripley because Tom has been living as Dickie and hasn't left any clues about where he or she is. This means that Dickie Greenleaf will be a suspect in not one but two murders, Freddie Miles and Tom Ripley's. When Marge comes into town, Tom calls her as himself and reassures her that everything is fine. He then goes to Sicily as Dickie to get away from the clues about who Dickie is there and come back to Italy as Tom Ripley. After behaving as Tom Ripley again for a few days, he sends Dickie's things ahead to Venice in case he wants to get them back at a later time. He then goes back to Rome as himself. The search for a missing Dickie Greenleaf will be written about in the media when he comes back. There is then a search, which gets more and more attention in the Italian press. When Tom moves to Venice, people ask him where Dickie is and he goes to parties. Soon, Marge comes to town. She sees Dickie's rings in Tom's room and decides that Dickie must have killed himself because he would never be without his rings, she says. But Dickie's trail has gone cold by the time Herbert and an American detective get to Italy. In his last and most blatant lie, Tom writes a letter from Dickie in which he gives Tom his entire wealth. Even though he is scared to take on such a big project, Tom sends the letter to Herbert and then starts his trip to Greece. But since Dickie's bags were found at the American Express in Venice, Tom is afraid that the police will find out about him when they get his fingerprints. When Tom gets off the boat in Greece, He sees police officers on the shore and is sure that his luck and lying streak is over. The cops don't stop him when he gets off the ship, though. Tom goes to the American Express to get his mail and finds a letter from Herbert agreeing with Dickie's wishes that Tom be the only person to receive his estate and stating that the money will be sent to Tom soon. In a state of relief, Tom calls a taxi and tells the driver to take him to the best hotel in town.
About the author. Patricia Highsmith was born in Texas and grew up in and around New York City. Her psychological thrillers and crime stories have been turned into movies and TV shows all over the world. One of her most famous books is The Talented Mr. Ripley. Highsmith graduated from Barnard College and became known for her short stories in the early 1940s. Her first book, Strangers on a Train, came out in 1950 and was a big hit. The book was later turned into a movie that Alfred Hitchcock directed. Many editors, authors, and friends of hers called her difficult, cruel, rough, and relentlessly ugly. Highsmith had depression and eating disorders her whole life. As an adult, Highsmith, who was a lesbian, had trouble with relationships with both men and women. She is known for writing and releasing The Price of Salt in 1952 under a different name. It was the first lesbian book with a happy end. She went to Switzerland in 1963 and stayed there until she died in 1995.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.